going to try to get out of the... Oh, no.
Okay, I see the little symbol now. All right, so we set up ourselves this little project where, you know, we're going, these things mirror our conversations that we have on the telephone. But for this particular one, and what we did for the Queen one is we picked a particular topic and decided to go off of that topic. So last time it was the Queen videos. And if you haven't had a chance to see those, go see those. Most popular video so far, which isn't saying a lot. So I'm here again with my brother Bryce. And we decided that what we're going to do is talk about some of our favorite album covers that are photographs, whether they're manipulated or you have to kind of be able to cite somebody that took the picture or that is clearly a photograph and not an illustration. So basically non-illustrated and just text albums. And so I'll go ahead and let you go first. If you have anything else you want to say before that, if I missed?
Nothing that you missed. I will say I kept my choices to photos of the band. I put an additional limitation on myself of wanting to be sure that it was made sort of specifically for the album or to specifically to represent the artist, because there's some great album covers that I know are just, you know, pre-existing art that they took a really good image, and whether it's a painting or a photograph, and then put, you know, or an archival photograph, something like 10,000 Maniacs in My Tribe, you know, it's got all the archers that are little kids on the cover, which was not taken for that album. It was just a cool picture that they put together. So mine are all of artists themselves. So that was the only thing, but that wasn't a rule. That's just something that I settled on myself.
I went with pictures that I like.
Mm-hmm.
So album covers that I think are pretty cool, and just dived into them. And just to be clear to anybody who watches this, we are not like history experts or music experts. We're just talking about what we like. And a lot of times when we have these conversations, you mention a band and I'll go online and do a bunch of research on them, or I'll mention a band and you'll just basically ignore it. But no, I'm kidding. But you know, this is about having fun with coming up with a topic and actually going and researching it and finding out what you don't know about these albums. And I found out quite a bit personally about certain album covers that, you know, what the story is behind them that I didn't know. And so that's what it's about. It's about actually growing your knowledge about the music that you curate.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I'd say go first.
Okay, so for my first choice, I went with the 1985 debut EP of Fishbone. I like what appeals to me is kind of the chaos of the image. You know, it projects a chaotic energy, which I think is well suited for the music found thereupon. That's from 1985. The photographer is John Scarpati. Don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. I think there's a thread that goes through here a little bit. Nothing that I was looking for, but it seems like a number of these are early in the particular photographer's career. And so I think he did a lot. I didn't write down my notes on him. The album cover itself makes me think of Madness's first album, One Step Beyond, you know, that's got all them kind of kneeling on each other in a big kind of thing that kind of has that nutty energy. And so this is a lot more raw than this photographer's work necessarily became. I mean, this really has the feel of no setup whatsoever. You know, you got the band, you got the photographer. Oh, here's a room. Let's do something in this room. And so there's a rawness to it, a realness to it. There's weirdly an artlessness to it that I'm drawn to. You know, so it's not a gorgeous photo, but it is. There we go. It is energetic. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, that it's energetic, and that's what you're going to get on that album.
Yeah.
Is that their first album?
Their first EP, yeah, I believe. I think their first album was Truth and Soul, maybe. Their first full album. But yeah, that was from 1985. Yeah, I found out more information on the photographer and didn't make a note of it here, and all of it's fallen out of my head as we're here in the moment. But I believe he did other work that was more refined, more sort of classical portraiture that also showed up on album covers later. So that's my first one. Fishbone.
Fishbone. Okay. Mine. I went with a little bit of design aesthetic. And I'll go into a little bit here about New Order. Let's see if I can show that up close. New Order, Low Life. The original album, this bit here was actually an obi, a rice paper obi that came on the album. I just have the CD now, and so it's a fake obi. But this picture here was done by, well, and there's this picture. The picture on the back. And I'm going to sound horrible here because I cannot remember the names of all the members. There's
Bernard Sumner.
Peter Hook. And interesting thing about that is it, for me, it kind of has that same style, and I wonder if it was intended that way, where the pictures are elongated slightly. Mm-hmm. Like if back to Rubber Soul.
Yeah.
You know, the story behind Rubber Soul is they were looking at the picture, it had fallen, and the band was like, no, that's what we want this particular picture to look like. And so this was done by New Order's longtime art designer and photographer Peter Saville, and he did covers for Joy Division, Wham, The Sparks, and Roxy Music. He actually took these pictures with a Polaroid camera, and so they were originally going to be used for like a fanzine or something like that, but he ended up taking them and using them on the album. And the interesting thing, if you know anything about New Order, I believe this is the only album where the members of New Order appear on the album cover, or at least one of them. So there's an appearance of a band member on the cover. Every other cover that they do is either an illustration or a picture, but not of them. So all the other covers are artsy in the way of the art symbolizing what's on the album. This here is just strictly their pictures on there, and the only time that ever occurred. So that's what I found interesting about the whole thing. Is the packaging for this was very interesting, with the rice paper obi, the picture of the band. It's a very good album. Came out in 1985 on Factory in the UK. I believe it was Quest in the US. So that's my first choice. I've always thought that this picture was kind of cool, and I always thought it was weird that it was the only album that New Order actually appears on.
Yeah, and still doing that kind of, hopefully I'm not wrecking anything for later, but it makes me think a little bit of Life's Rich Pageant, which, the REM album, which has half of the drummer's face on the cover, so even though it's got a band portrait on the cover, it is untraditionally the drummer instead of the lead singer, and it cuts his face in half and has a buffalo on the bottom side of it.
Yeah, this guy is the drummer and synthesizer player in New Order.
Okay.
And it was Joy Division as well.
Yeah, I guess I always thought that was Peter Hook, but I don't know. I don't.
With the longer hair and the facial hair.
So yeah, that shows you how much I would recognize Bernard Sumner, but the other people show up. Jillian was the.
And she's married to this guy actually.
Okay.
And Peter Hook. This was the first, not for this tour, but for the next album. That was the first time I went to a concert. So I've actually seen them all and basically got it down. But yeah, I'm terrible with names, and I didn't put that into my notes particularly because I was focusing on the picture. But since this band orientated, I probably should have figured out this guy's name that's on the cover. But hopefully somewhere below us, that will be rectified.
Yes. All right.
And what would be your next album?
Okay. Well, I'm choosing one. I mean, I had already chosen it, but I'll show the next one kind of based off of that because it has a similar feel to me while being completely different. And it is Lyle Lovett's Joshua Judge's Ruth. One would imagine that this is cropped this way, that the original photo does not, in fact, would have his actual face in it, and not just be cut down. So I like the unusual cropping on it, and that his face only appears really in a reflection. So this is Lyle Lovett's 1992 album, Joshua Judge's Ruth. And it's just striking to me that it's just a kind of a photo of his hands, but again, just a picture, I guess, but it has that sort of elongated feel to me, and I think Lyle Lovett's head just has that elongated feel to it normally. It was photographed by Peter Nash, who has, according to his website, provided the cover photo for 30 or more albums that have gone gold. He was Nashville based, so it was pretty much all country acts for the most part that he was photographing. And he left at some point Nashville and moved to Boise, Idaho to photograph dogs instead. And it's funny, and so his black and white photos I like a lot. The color photos I wasn't liking nearly as much as I was looking through some of his portfolio. I think the manipulations that you can do in black and white, and its dependency on contrast. You could do a lot more. You can play with it a lot more in post. Whereas his color photographs felt more like they were lit for days, but lit in a manner that made the photos look super fake. So it's like the band standing in front of a street scene, but they don't look like they're actually there because they've been lit, and so much that their lighting is completely different to the background lighting. So I wasn't crazy about necessarily his other work that I looked through, but most of it was more straight, what you would think of as a portrait. And I imagine, again, that this started as a straight portrait, but they saw that his reflection came out in the table, and something about the sideways cropping and being, his hands being the thing that are in focus. I just thought it was a very different way to present an artist.
By obscuring his face a little bit. And do you know any other bands or artists that that Nash photographed for?
Yeah, a lot of who you would think of, like Reba McEntire. I think George Strait.
Willie Nelson.
Yeah, I know he's photographed Willie Nelson because I saw a Willie Nelson photograph. I don't know if it was necessarily one of his album covers, but yeah, almost everybody that has gone through or went through Nashville while he was there and working. From great big artists to some more kind of, it seemed like there were some more rock oriented acts. But yeah, I liked his black and white work a lot. I was less enthusiastic about the color, but I do like this particular album, the overall design. I like the photograph and I like the overall graphic design of it.
All right, so that's your number 2?
That's my number 2.
Okay, my number 2, I went big. Biggest album probably of 1987, I'm guessing. U2's The Joshua Tree on Island Records. Probably one of the more iconic album covers from the 80s, I would say. I mean, anybody could see this and they know instantly what it is, even if it didn't have the title on the top. This was photographed by Anton Corbjin. I just recently found out he's a Dutch photographer. I found it out quite soon ago, actually. And he's done a lot of pictures for Golden Earring. He's done album covers for the Cramps, the Rolling Stones, and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, are just some of the ones that he did. This one here, he just followed U2 around, and I saw on a documentary a while ago that what he was going for. If you notice, they kind of look like the Edge has this weird kind of hat on. They're wearing modern clothes, but it's very plain clothing, almost like it's from the turn of the century. And the idea behind this album was the previous album had started getting them known very well internationally. They were a hot ticket in England. They were a hot ticket in Ireland. And they basically, started in Ireland, grew big in England, big in Europe, and they were starting to get a big following in America. And the idea behind this is U2 as the Irish immigrant coming to America. And so that's why they use these like barren landscapes. It gives it a feeling of conquering the West, basically. And the iconic picture on the back of this Joshua tree, despite popular belief that this was shot in Joshua Tree National Park, which is maybe an hour from where I live, they're actually about an hour and a half the other direction in Death Valley. The picture on the front was taken from a peak up in Death Valley, like Ecclesiastics Peak or something is what it's called. I'm getting that wrong. I'll put the correct name down in the bottom. But the idea is to show them as immigrants to America and their roots of basically trying to conquer America with their music. So it has that feeling. This tree here now, unfortunately, no longer exists. Well, it does, but it's on the ground. It's been knocked down. You can visit the site where it was at. There is a plaque there that says, have you found what you're looking for? Referencing the song on here, still haven't found what I'm looking for. Actually quite well shot. And I'll show the inside here. Again, with the same Joshua tree. This is about somewhere between 3/4 of a mile and a mile off of the 190 in Death Valley. And so this tree here now just lies on the ground. There's a little memorial there that exists where people have left symbols, old guitars. I think there's a Joshua Tree album that sits out there. I'm sure it's melted by now. It's the hottest spot on the planet. Mm-hmm. And so it ended up being that Anton Corbjin, I clipped that bit out. Turns out that Anton worked quite a bit with U2, and he does work on a few of their albums. So he's worked on quite a few. And then the art design for this was done by an Irish art design company called the Creative Group, which is a little ironic that they came up with such a lame name. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Hypnosis is kind of vague, It's like, yeah, Creative Group. That's just, I don't know if that's Irish practicality or not or what. But they designed this album, and they designed most of the album covers for U2. And so I've always liked this picture. I have a personal love for it because these pictures were taken, I mean, literally within an hour of the house. And so these are somewhat local pictures of where I live. Now, where I live isn't nearly this barren, but it's interesting that something this big was done just kind of in my area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I switched when you told me this is the one that you mentioned beforehand to me that you were doing, which made me change one of my choices, which was slightly against the grain, All That You Can't Leave Behind, the 2000 or so U2 album that also had an Anton Corbjin cover photo. So I looked up, so I saw some information about him too, and he's worked extensively also then, I guess, with Depeche Mode, and has directed videos for them. I think he's worked with Tom Waits, although I don't know if I'm now mixing him up with someone else I got who was shot a Tom Waits cover. But yeah, I mean, certainly it's an iconic album cover about it, and I just, my contrarian nature made me avoid, you know, Patti Smith Horses and Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run and take your pick Beatles album covers. You know, there's some great ones out there that are more or less just photos of the artist, but I thought, you know what's so Joshua Trees, of course, the Joshua Tree is a great album cover. It's a great iconic photo, but I thought this All That You Can't Leave Behind would be an interesting, as them just kind of grouped in Charles de Gaulle Airport, just one of the terminals, and they're much smaller within the frame in this giant terminal. And I thought, there's an under-heralded U2 cover / Anton Corbjin photo. But yeah, he was a very popular and is still a, you know, photographer. He's shot a lot of people and has that very contrasty image. You know, it's not necessarily, I'm not one of these people who you look at a photo and you know, oh, that's a so-and-so photo. But it's enough of a style that you would at the very least say, oh, you know what, that looks like an Anton Corbjin photo. And it might in fact be one. But yeah, it's a great iconic cover. Some friends of mine, we went to Joshua Tree in our senior year in high school, and we recreated the album art there from just what we had on hand, you know. So I think I borrowed a hat from somebody. I was the edge in the photo, and we just we lined up from our best memory of the album cover. So that was about 3 years after Joshua Tree came out, but I have a photo of me and several friends doing the pose. Obviously we were in Joshua Tree, so the landscape doesn't necessarily look anything like the photo there. But
and I'm gonna have to make sure I could find this picture. I think I still have the book. Okay, I'll cut a bit of here. Let me see if I got that Bloom County still.
Oh yeah. Is that Billy and the Boingers?
All right, sorry about that, dude. I that just hit me, and I don't know where that is. I should have that somewhere.
Yeah, I have it somewhere too. That Billy and the Boingers one.
Yeah, the Boingers. So Bloom County, an old 1980s comic strip, has a cover of. I don't know if I have that one or the one with Opus sitting on that senator's lap.
Hmm.
Very much a product of its time that nobody would get today.
Yeah. But in any case, yeah, it's definitely been famous enough to parody.
Yeah, and this was iconic enough where it's like, I think Opus was the main guy right here. He was Bono. And then all the other characters were in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's my number 2.
All right. Let's see. So for my number 3, I have something a little more recent. I try to get a broad selection as much as I could, and this is St. Vincent. The album is Actor from 2009. The first album of hers that I got. It came in a sleeve that has the same photo and the album title above it, but this, and then on just the disc itself is just the photo and another photo on the back. It was, let me see, taken by an Annabel Mehran. I want to call her Mehran because it's spelled like Tehran, but with an M instead of a T. The city, and there's something enigmatic to me about this portrait. It's flipped. I saw the original was flipped and longer, and it's probably just as well. It seemed like the shirt, the blouse that she's wearing struck me as a bit of a monstrosity with a kind of a big, silky, almost flower thing going on, hanging off. But just to her head like that, it's, to me, just a super enigmatic, expressionless stare off to the side that matches, to me, the enigma of Annie Clark, who is the woman who goes by St. Vincent, her performing name. And it's just, yeah, it's so mild. I mean, she's so sort of bemused in it, and so she's this strikingly beautiful woman, just kind of looking enigmatically off in the distance somewhere. So it invites you in, at the same time it holds you off, and so yeah, and so for a very kind of flat portrait style, there's no real deep shadows or anything, but it's just a portrait that grabs me, and yeah, intentionally or not, I guess it's reflecting the light, but her pupils are actually white in the photo, which adds to that sort of glassy-eyed, I think, impression that I get off of it. So her pupils are not actually black in the photos. I think they're reflecting the lights, much like my glasses are reflecting so many things in these videos. But yeah, and I came up, I think, with some more information on the photographer, but I didn't make a note of it, and it's all fallen out of my head. Yes. So your next one is Funkadelic?
Let's go ahead and get the... Go on.
That was pretty much all I had on that one.
My first initial response, I don't know that album, and when you showed it, she does have that where she's looking off and she's just not quite smiling. It's not even almost a smirk. you know? And I wonder if it's some sort of ode to the Mona Lisa in that sense, you know, where it's what she's smiling about, you know? And I think that's a way that you can draw in somebody to check out the album. I mean, how many times, I don't know about you, but back in the day, man, I picked albums based on, I love that album cover. And I'm still guilty of it today.
Yeah, and I think that it wasn't even the song that, like, this song that I heard from her was from her prior album. I think this is her second album. And yet the cover of this one, I think, grabbed me more. And now I have all of her albums, but I feel like this really represents her in this sort of standoffish, you know, kind of, like you said, Mona Lisa, like what's going on in there, you know, what are you thinking about, kind of way. And I think it's a cool representation for something that I wouldn't necessarily, I think a running thread with me is that photos that are less than great photos, kind of like the Fishbone one, can make better album covers than an immaculate photo. They just have a little more personality to them. And I mean that sort of from a technical standpoint. So things that are like blurry or washed out or overblown can be a more striking image than something that's, you know, just perfectly posed and perfectly composed and perfectly lit and everything like that. And yet this subverts that a little bit, because it feels like it's so perfectly everything, but that's not really her. You know, her images or her songs are kind of the dark underbelly of things, you know. So it's almost like a juxtaposition, you know, this kind of mild, maybe slightly bemused stare off into the middle distance, as somebody who's gonna explore, you know, the dark underbelly of life and love. I just think it works well in a way that it probably wouldn't work as well if it was like Whitney Houston or somebody who was singing from the heart, you know. And so this feels like it's a nice enough photo that it should be a boring album cover, but it captures something so enigmatic about the artist that I feel like it works.
Right on. Well, my number 3, if you're done.
Yep.
My number 3, I don't think it was necessarily a totally popular album. I have the cassette of it, and it's Public Image Limited 9, and hopefully this can be seen. But you see that a picture of
Johnny
John Lydon, but if you can get up to it closely, you'll see that the photograph is made of little PIL logos. So it's a manipulated photo to where when you look at it from a distance, it's clearly his face, but as it comes in closer, it becomes more and more distorted, but you can see PIL. I don't know if you can, it's real small on my camera.
I can.
And so the initial photography for this one was done by Ross Halfin, who was started in the late 70s. He was known for a lot of punk bands in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
He did move to America, where he did less punk photography and more hard rock and heavy metal. I think he's still in the U.S. today. Still does photography. Some of the bands that he has done album covers for are Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, the Cockney Rejects was an early one that he did, and The Who. He actually did the picture for The Kids Are All Right by The Who. So he's done bigger album covers. But two things, I don't have that album, and I like the way the art department manipulated this photo to have that dual meaning, you know, where you have the PIL symbols making up the entire picture. The design work was done by two computer designers, Rob Faulkner and Rod Dyer. And it seems like they were only around for a short time. And this is one of the few album covers that they did. I couldn't find a lot of information on those guys, but they were the ones that manipulated the photo so that it could be made up of all little PIL logos.
Yeah, I have a puzzle that's surprisingly difficult. And there was a line of jigsaw puzzles I know that were, they called them photo mosaics, which were kind of the same thing. If you look at them from a distance, they look like one thing. And if you look at them up close, they're made up of a lot of smaller images that I'm almost certain have been, you know, color treated somewhat, but the idea being that it's something that is primarily based on the color of, you know, the larger image. And so it was like a photo, I think one was maybe like a painting of Van Gogh that was made up of Van Gogh paintings, you know, very small. And I'm sure that, it had to be treated, you know, in a certain way in order to make that reflect the proper colors. But that's what it makes me think of, and it is a neat trick to be able to do.
I've seen a picture like that of Yoda, and it's all made up of screenshots from the Star Wars movies.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's cool. I don't necessarily have anything to add on that, but that's cool. You need to see if you can come up with a graphic that will show it, you know, on the video a little better.
Yeah. So if you want to go ahead and go on to your number 4.
Okay. Let's see. For my next one, how about this is David Mead's The Luxury of Time, his first album from 1999, I think. Yeah. And it's photographed by Tony Duran, which is, this is another one that seemed to have gotten him pretty early in his career. Tony Duran has then made much more famous album covers for the likes of Jennifer Lopez and Beyonce. I think he shot Beyonce for that album cover and something on the 6 or something with 6 in it, ironically, for Jennifer Lopez. But his overall photography, his oeuvre, if you will, is very much sort of fashion based. And so what I like about this image, again, it's kind of like the Lyle Lovett one, you know, that's part of the story is cut off there, and so I like that he's paying attention to someone, and then funnily enough, on the back, it's just empty. There's nobody there. He's not there. The woman's not there. So it's you never get her anywhere on the artwork. So I liked it. It seemed like a little vignette. It's a little story. You know, it seemed like he's making eyes at or making moves on maybe somebody. But it's somebody. I feel like the photographer. You know, a year or two after this was taken, they probably couldn't have afforded this particular photographer. And so his style makes me think very much of Herb Ritts, who was kind of iconic in the 80s. And so he's got kind of a chiseled body, a lot of male models, a lot of kind of leather and not necessarily overt fetishness, but that kind of Tom of Finland kind of hunkiness, you know, and a lot of fashion and a lot of models, both male and female, but enough of male models, you know, that it seems like it's kind of a focus, and like the shots more that he wants to shoot are more male models, and because he's a high-end photographer, shoots a lot of female models as well, but has definitely an eye for fashion and composition, and very posed in the way, to me, that the Herb Ritts photos of the 1980s were very of sort of outsized sexuality, you know, the guy holding the tires with his chiseled chest, and so it makes me think of very much in that style. Like you could look at a good number of these Tony Duran photos, and in that way that I was talking about before, I would say, wow, that looks like a Herb Ritts photo, and so. Yeah, but I like that, you know, that this is not fetishy or, you know, overly I can't think of the word, but it's a little bit of a vignette in a way that his subsequent photos are less vignette-y than this, you know, that it feels like they're telling a little story. It's more like, what can bodies do? And, you know, you got a cat. Oh, you see your cat roaming around behind you. But he is still dressed sharp, you know, and it is a posed kind of thing, but it's very mannered, sophisticated kind of pop music that David Mead makes. This is his first record, and so I kind of like and it's very polished, the music itself, and so I feel like it represents well the music on the album.
Yeah. You know, just seeing that picture for the first time, for me, it's apparent that there is some sexual tension there. Mm-hmm. I like how he crops out a lot of the picture, so it's like that widescreen look, but he still has, even though if he would have done that all the way, he would have cut off the guy's head, and so the line stops and then goes around the guy's head and goes, kind of letting you focus in on, is that the artist of the album?
David Mead. No, that is David Mead in the photograph.
The focus that it is David Mead there.
Yeah, and it is a crop. I don't think. I mean, it is not a crop, I should say. That is just the wall, kind of behind him.
Oh, so it kind of creates that effect.
Yeah.
Thought that was like how we were looking at the U2 album, mm-hmm. How it cropped the top and the bottom, and yeah, I thought the same thing, but that's the entire.
Yeah, it's just a wall.
Wow. So that does And it does create a very artistic view and makes you, like, I noticed that also, you know how I am about like the Fibonacci ratio and all of that kind of thing, that he does set the singer right there at that Fibonacci mark,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where he's about right there, where if you could divide it up, the picture into just being off center, you know, based on the way ancient architecture was done, and you know, the famous one that shows the Fibonacci ratio would be the half shell.
Mm-hmm.
How it's all of those valves inside that shell are directly proportional to the one before it. Trees actually also go off of that same ratio, that you got the trunk that goes to major branches, that goes to sub branches, that go down to the little branches that have the actual leaves on them.
Mm-hmm.
You could find this math in a lot of human architecture. It's been recognized for a long time. It's even within your face. These ratios between the top of your head to your eyes, and then from your eyes to your chin. You know, if I took my head sideways, you could probably take that, superimpose that picture somehow on there, and his picture would fall to where my eyes are at, you know, or like where my mouth is sitting. Everything is proportional in your face, and you know, that's why some people look off when you look at them at first, you know, especially if they've had plastic surgery, because they've messed with those particular ratios. And so that would be a case of where the ratio is thrown off, but in that picture he's used those ratios to create a very artistic picture.
So yeah, that's all I have for that. I feel like it's was a cool portrait that really worked well as an album cover for the kind of music that is on the album. So what's your up next?
Well, my number 4, not necessarily an iconic cover anymore. I believe that this version of this album doesn't exist anymore, which actually I should show it up close. Bad Religion, 80 to 85. I like this picture because it shows a sense of camaraderie with the band. It's a band photo, from what I understand. On the album, nobody's credited. I did a lot of searching to find out who did this particular photograph. Not credited at all. It's an uncredited photograph. My guess is it might be one of the other members of the band. It's like a selfie, I guess, for what it was in 80 to 85. But it gives a sense of united, but almost like in a working man's way. So instead of everybody putting their hand in, you know, we're putting in the footwork. So this is, to me, is the equivalent of the Three Musketeers putting all their hands in the middle, and one for all and all for one, you know? And that's what the picture portrays to me. And basically, if anybody took the picture, it would be Brett Gurewitz, who is in this band, and he's also the owner of Epitaph Records, who did most of Bad Religion's albums. Was the record company that did it. It's a simple photograph. The pictures on the inside are literally just film strips. And so to me, it's interesting how this has almost like it's framed in one of those film strips as well. And so it's a very simple one, and I think it draws you in. It's the same thing here where you have this line here, which would be about where the Fibonacci ratio is, and that's basically where all four of the feet meet up, and that's what makes it a, you know, to me, you know, it's almost like the Three Musketeers, but with more than three people.
Yeah, it's funny that you say the Three Musketeers, because what it makes me think of is 10, the Pearl Jam album cover,
yeah,
with all the, you know, everyone high-fiving instead, or maybe not high-fiving, but all hands up. So it has that feel to me. If I was doing an association, I would come up with Pearl Jam, I think. And so it does feel like it conveys this kind of a gritty photo, and shows, yeah, that there's some style, but it is a very blue collar, you know, workman style, and that works well for the time. And knowing not a ton, but I know a fair amount of Bad Religion, you know, that seems like a no-nonsense, you know, like a good way to portray that sort of no-nonsense.
Work ethic,
and not only the work ethic, but funnily enough, especially on an uncredited photo of, yeah, you know, okay, I guess our album needs a cover, you know, here's this photo of our shoes, you know. It's kind of
well, this is a comp album of all their early work, so it's their first album, How Could Hell Be Any Worse, along with Back from the Known. And any Bad Religion fan knows that after How Could Hell Be Any Worse, Bad Religion put out an album that was far less punk and much more proggy, and despised by the fans, despised. It basically broke up the band. And so this has the first album, the next EP after the dreaded Into the Known album, and it has some songs that were put on a comp of different punk bands that were in Southern California at the time. So it actually has a, you know, just as bands like Electric Wizard, Bewitcher, Black Sabbath, their very first song is the name of the band, the name of the album, and it's their first song. So Bad Religion does have a Bad Religion song, and that's probably where they ended up getting their name from. They do have atheist perspectives, but it's more political than I would say being about religion itself. So I think a lot of people who don't know Bad Religion tend to think of them as probably more like a metal band when you see some of their artwork. And if you're not familiar with punk, and I think that this does a very good job of illustrating this is a punk album.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. All right. Let's see. My next one up. How about? This is just a card on the version that I have, the reissue that I have, but Pet Shop Boys. Actually, funny that we talked about this album a little bit earlier today, or you mentioned it, and obviously the striking thing is that Neil Tennant is yawning in the photo, and can you even think of another album cover where, you know, it's so sort of droll that the artist is actually yawning on the cover. And it was not shot for this album cover. They had actually commissioned a painting, a portrait, that they ended up not caring for. But they had done some, so when that turned out to be a bust, I guess, for this album, they scrambled looking for some promo shots or anything that they felt like they could use. And this was taken by Cindy Palmano, who is maybe best known for providing Tori Amos with her first 3 album covers. But interesting to me in particular is that she did the band photos of XTC on their Skylarking album. So none of this, I didn't know any of that before doing this research this last week. And so this photo they came up with, but they had already sent it to one of the British magazines, NME or Melody Maker or something. And so they were scrambling to get it back. Say, no, don't run this, don't run this, don't run this. We want to use it as the album cover, and ended up having to agree to do a photo session for the magazine in order to get the photo back so that they could use it as the album cover. And so Cindy Palmano has a couple of photographs, one of which being of the Pet Shop Boys that I guess are in the National Portrait Gallery in England. And so she has didn't have necessarily a long career in music photography, but has had a long career in photography, and I think has gone a little more journalistic in more recent years. Though again, I could be getting that wrong. I felt like I would have all this information straight in my head and just did some bullet points. And now they're all running together, so I forget who's the person who went to Asia and started, taking sort of more street photography. And then there was somebody else who did just kind of more personal photography. But she definitely has a website, Cindy Palmano, that I went to. And and so not only do I like the picture, but I like how you could have made that much bigger, but they chose not to, and just to have the photo, have it largely white. And the album cover title always made me laugh in the way that it was undersold. Pet Shop Boys, actually, just made me laugh. I just think that it's very dry and droll, and again, kind of very Pet Shop Boys. So.
Well, yeah. I noticed that it has a similar quality to it as Please, which I do have on album. And it's the same idea. It's just a picture of them, but very, very small. It's like almost like postage stamp size, and you have all of this white that's around it. The next album after Please?
Yeah.
Or it was, and then after that was Disco. I think was their other album that I remember.
Gosh, I almost feel like there was a third. Well, there was Introspective, which I think then was just Bands of Color. And then there was the album that had Being Boring on it, which I'm blanking on the title of, that had them on the cover with like holding roses in kind of a 4, whatever you call a triptych with 4 photos in it. So it's got, a chair, them holding roses, the roses on the chair, and then like nothing or something like that, which seemed to almost unintentionally establish a look. Because one of the things that I read that they did not like about this photo was that they were wearing tuxedos, you know, and so this was not necessarily, it wasn't a posed shot, you know, she just took the shot while he was yawning because he was tired. So it wasn't like, and I'll be yawning on the you know, on the cover of this album, haha. It was just a photo that she had taken during a photo shoot where he was exhausted and was yawning, and she snapped one, and they ended up kind of liking the way it looked. But we're not crazy about the fact that they were wearing tuxedos, because I think they may be in black tie and on the Please cover, right?
I could pull it out real quick to just to see.
Or is that the one where he's got the hoodie? I don't know.
Right here. This should be it here.
The hoodie?
No, they're in like
They're white.
White. They're in white. It's a very, very white cover.
Yeah,
Definitely.
very clean.
Yeah, even the name, even the back is, all the lettering on this is very angular, very square. Almost as if that was the point that they were trying to make. It's almost kind of harkens to me, as stupid as it sounds, the White Album by the Beatles, and the aesthetic of just a very simple aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Beatles put that album out. I think there was a reason why it was a self-titled album. That at that time, that's how they. This is who we are. You know what I'm saying? Sgt. Pepper's was more of like a caricature.
Yeah.
And Beatles was literally stripping back everything that was on that was on, you know, Sgt. Pepper's. And it's just like these are just the boys, you know, and I get that same feeling from when I look at these two Pet Shop Boy albums, is that almost like this is who we are, but you know, this is all you know of us, is this little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's all this out here, so listen to the album, because then you'll find out, it'll kind of fill in these other spaces for you in your mind's eye. I don't know, it's one of those things where it's almost isolating, you know. Mm-hmm. It's weird, people in the picture, and it's still they're isolated still, it feels like, you know, the way that those are shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of space above them, and actually, you know, that they're at the bottom of the picture. There's tons of empty white space above them, which, you know, again, I think if you look at where their faces sit in there, it's right in that Fibonacci ratio again, you know, so it makes it pleasing, yet you have that isolation tension in it. You know, there's still a little tension in that picture, even though the guy is yawning.
Mm-hmm. I think there might be issues of it where they are bigger on the frame, but I think this original was that they were much smaller and kind of at the bottom of the frame. But yeah, that's my next pick.
All right, my next pick, another one that's kind of weird. I will always like this picture from Palehead. This is the album Strait. This is a band that is Ministry and Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat, which is a very unusual pairing, because Al Jorgensen from Ministry is known for doing acid, coke, heroin, big time druggy. Whereas you have Ian MacKaye, who was I don't know if he was ever straight edge, but he wrote that song straight edge, and a lot of people made that their lifestyle. You know, no sex out of marriage, no alcohol, no drugs, no cigarettes, no vices. And so they were very, very different on their life philosophies, which might explain that this CD or this tape does have every song that they ever did. You can get the EPs, which will have 2 of each song on there, you know, so you could pair them all off. You can get an EP. They did put out a CD, but it did not have No Bunny on it. And I don't think it have I Will Refuse on it. This is the only way to get all of their songs on one media. Now, I always thought that was an interesting picture, and when I was researching this, the only credit that's given to this photograph is the Austin City Library. And so when I looked up, so I tried to see if I could find it in a Austin Library, public library reference. I couldn't find it, but as soon as I looked up Austin, this building shows up. So this building, this is actually an old picture of the Texas State Capitol. And I find it weird because the way it's arranged, I don't know if it kind of looks like it, but if you pull it far away, it has a facial type aspect to it. You know, here's the eyes and the mouth. Mm-hmm. And this part here is slightly off center. I think they used more of a traditional, 3x3 kind of squaring on this picture. I don't know how much it's cropped or not, but for such a menacing picture, it's interesting that, hey, what looks like a haunted house. Oh, this picture of this Texas State Capitol. And so the little fact I know is that this building was originally erected in 1888 in Austin, Texas, and became and it still is today, the Texas Capitol Building, Texas.
There you go. Well, certainly had the shape of a Capitol building.
Yeah, it almost looks like it could be the Capitol, U.S. Capitol building.
Yeah.
But in all actuality, it's the Texas State. And I believe, I'm not positive, I know ministry is out of Chicago. So it's interesting to me, but somehow I felt like there was a Texas connection somewhere there. But from what I know, I believe ministry is from Chicago, but maybe they were originally from Texas. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Looking at it, I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know if were you saying that cassette was the only way to get all of it? Is there not a vinyl version of that?
The only vinyl versions are 3 EPs with, a pairing of 2 of each of the, how do I put this right? 2 songs. If you took 2 songs off of here and paired them together, that would be an EP. So half of these are A sides and the other half are B sides. They did put out a CD in Europe, but it only had 4 of the songs on it. And so the only way that you can get all 6 of these songs, but they're either going to appear 2 songs a piece on EPs, or they're going to appear on a CD. There was an EP put out, but again, it only had 4 songs, and I think 2 of the songs that were on the CD are not on the vinyl. So they're kind of switched out. And so the only way that all 6 of their songs appear on one single bit of media is this tape right here.
So it's just, it was interesting because it appears to be a square design. I mean, because it says both Palehead and Trait on the cover image, in addition to saying Palehead and Trait underneath it. So it felt like that would be the square format
cover.
Like that would be the cover for the CD or the vinyl version.
Exactly.
But yeah, which I mean takes away some of the face impression. I can see the eyes part.
Yeah. Well, it still looks kind of facey. Did the eyes shift up into the smoke, kind of? But then that's me. I see faces and everything.
There you go. It looks a little like Venom or something.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, it's a cool shot. I'm guessing it's an archival shot then. Of just, looming clouds over the Austin State Capitol building.
And so the concept is credited to Al Jurgensen. So very simple cover, but it does a good job of relaying, what you're going to hear on this, which is a very interesting mix of industrial and punk. It's industrial music with punk vocals over the top. I mean, Ian MacKaye, if you know how he screams in Minor Threat, he's doing the same thing on here. Only you do get a little Al Jurgensen. He does do some of the background vocals as well. And Paul Barker, I believe his name is, the other part of Ministry, also is on this album.
Okay.
I bet you it's at least an hour already.
Yeah, well, we got started a little after 1:30, right? And we have to give a few minutes, so it's 3:11 now. So yeah.
So yeah, and we go into some detail, and if people don't like that, I don't know what to say to that exactly. But I say we break this up into 2.
All right.
And I could probably edit it right there. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and break this up into 2 parts again because we're so gabby and detailed orientated to a point. So we'll go ahead and pick this up again tomorrow. And for all the VC out there that have made it to this point, thanks for watching. And we'll see you on the next part.
Meow, baby.
Don't put that in.